Battle City is widely regarded as many Yu-Gi-Oh fans' favorite story arc, and for good reason. While Duelist Kingdom served as an excellent foundation for the series, introducing us to a rudimentary rule set and some iconic cards, Duelist Kingdom walked so Battle City could run. This arc saw a surge in card diversity, strategies, and themes, evolving from basic one-off gimmicks in Duelist Kingdom into wholly unique playstyles. One of the most interesting duelists from this saga was Odion, aka the Trap Monster Duelist, who wielded one of the most unique decks in all of Duel Monsters. Today we'll be exploring the ins and outs of his deck and what each of his cards would look like as a Magic the Gathering card. Before we get started, if you like turning Yu-Gi-Oh cards into MTG cards, please like and subscribe to see more videos just like this one. It helps the channel a lot and is much appreciated. We're kicking things off with one of the cards Odion is most famous for, his Embodiment of Apophis. This is a continuous trap card with the effect, during the main phase, special summon this card as a normal monster. Reptile type, Earth attribute level 4 with 1600 attack and 1800 defense. This card is also still a trap. Odion had 3 of these bad boys in his deck, and I remember getting really excited to see this card in his duel against Joey, because it took Yu-Gi-Oh to a new design space I didn't even know was possible at the time. Trap monsters are still some of the most interesting and creative cards to me, and I think Yu-Gi-Oh is missing out big time by not exploring spell monsters as well. And no, I don't mean pendulums. The funny thing about Magic is that it's been churning out cards with multiple types for many years now. I initially thought about making Embodiment of Apophis just an enchantment creature with morph, but that seemed boring to me, so I'd like to introduce you to 2 test cards that were never officially printed in MTG, Lightning Colt and Visitor from Planet Q. Both of these are instant creatures, a theoretical typing that Wizards R&D has never explored beyond these concepts, which are just wonderfully weird enough to be fitting. I'd make Embodiment of Apophis an instant creature Snake Warrior for 3 generic mana and 1 black mana. It would have 4 power and 5 toughness. That's right, for as cool as it was basically just a more fragile vanilla once it hit the field. Side note, I want to give a quick shout out to Planar Party, another small channel here on YouTube, for supplying me with these gorgeous Yu-Gi-Oh themed MTG rarity symbols. They sent me these completely out of the blue too, which I thought was really generous and helpful. They didn't ask for anything in return or even a shout out, but I had to give them one anyway because this was a fantastic surprise. Go check them out after you watch this video. Odion's next most iconic card is probably a certain Scorpion, but we'll talk about that later in the video. First, we should discuss a card that got Odion into a bit of a pickle, to put it mildly. The Winged Dragon of Ra. You see, this card didn't actually belong to Odion. His copy was a forgery since the real one belonged to his brother Merrick. But since Odion was pretending to be Merrick, he had to pretend to have all of his brother's cards, and that included the Mega Ultra Chicken in question. Unfortunately, since the gods don't like it when you play with proxies, Odion took about 300 million volts to the dome. I actually adapted this card way back in the very first video of this series, but I'd like to take another crack at it with some updates. Just like last time, I'm making this more of an anime flavored card than the nerfed version we got in the TCG. The Winged Dragon of Ra would be a legendary dragon god costing 7 generic, 1 red, and 2 white. This spell can't be countered. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice 3 creatures. This creature enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the combined power and toughness of all creatures sacrificed this way. Flying, haste, hexproof. Pay 3 life, destroy target creature. Pay all but 1 life, put X +1/+1 counters on this creature, where X is the life you paid this way. Something I didn't include last time is Ra's alternative mode, so I'd also give this Winged Dragon of Ra a transformation. When this creature enters the battlefield from your graveyard, transform it. Egyptian God Phoenix would be a 10/10 Phoenix God with flying, haste, hexproof, and indestructible. It would also have the ability to pay 3 life, destroy target creature. At the beginning of the next end step, exile this creature. I know this reeks of custom card keyword soup, but the anime god cards were really broken, and I feel like if you go to all these lengths to summon it, a creature this costly should do stuff, you know? But what do you think of this update? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Odion relied a lot on spells and traps in his deck and only had 2 straight up monsters in his deck overall. Since he's known more for his traps, let's look at Eye of Ujat. This is an anime-only card that triggers when an opponent declares an attack, changing the attack target to a monster your opponent controls instead, except the attacking monster. Initially, Magic's green fight mechanic came to mind, but the effect would still need a little tweaking beyond that. I'd make Eye of Ujat an instant for 2 green. You take no combat damage from target attacking creature this turn. That creature fights another target creature an opponent controls. Odion's reliance on spells and traps led to him having a largely defensive playstyle until he could get his main win condition up and running. Another trick in his toolbox was Magic Jammer. This counter trap card negates the activation of a spell card by discarding a card of your own. While quick play spell cards feel more like instants and continuous spells often have enchantment vibes, when I think of a normal spell card, the closest MTG analog that comes to mind is a sorcery. I'd make Magic Jammer an instant for 1 hybrid blue and black mana. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. Counter target sorcery spell. I feel like this might have some synergy with black and its love of discarding, maybe in a Madness deck, or it might be too costly and or narrow, but what do you think? Would this see any play? Odion's main boss monster is of course the Mystical Beast of Serket, which pairs with a spell card, Temple of the Kings, but he had to do a bit of legwork to set up the field for this monster's arrival. In the anime, he needed 2 additional cards to kick things off, Seal of Serket and Cup of Sealed Soul. The thing is, these cards have absolutely zero effect in the anime outside of summoning his boss monster, which is not really how cards work in Magic. For an example, to summon Vecna in MTG, you also need 3 cards, the Book of Vile Darkness as well as Eye of Vecna and Hand of Vecna. However, these cards also have their own beneficial effects. The Book of Vile Darkness lets you create a 2/2 black zombie every turn that you lose 2 or more life. Eye of Vecna grants you a card draw on casting plus recurring card draw for just 2 generic, plus its life loss synergizes with the Book of Vile Darkness. Hand of Vecna is an equipment that also synergizes with both cards by granting equipped creature +X/+X based on the number of cards in your hand. So you see why a non-creature card with absolutely no effect text just wouldn't fit right in Magic, even if they're in service of a greater card. For Seal of Serket and Cup of Sealed Soul, I hope you don't mind if I freestyle a bit since I'm going off of absolutely nothing. These both strike me as suitable for artifacts, so I'd make Seal of Serket an artifact with flash for 1 generic with an equip cost of 2 generic. However, its equip cost would be 0 for instant creatures. Equipped creature has hexproof. Pretty simple, but cheaper and faster than Swiftfoot Boots, synergizing with Odion's instant creature strategy. I'd give Cup of Sealed Soul a similar effect. It'd have flash as well for 2 generic, and an equip cost of 5 or 1 for an instant creature. Equipped creature has Death Touch, and whenever a creature dealt damage by this creature dies, you gain life equal to that creature's mana value. They're much more useful than the anime counterparts. I adapted D-Spell in a much earlier video in this series, and I just gave it a simple effect to destroy an enchantment. That adaptation was focused more on trying to make it a direct 1-to-1 translation. For a more flavorful take on the idea of deactivating magic, let's instead turn D-Spell into a modal instant. For 2 hybrid green and blue mana, choose 1. Counter target instant or sorcery spell, or destroy target enchantment. Too pushed, or do you think this is appropriately costed? For yet another adaptation that deserves a second try, we move on to Swords of Revealing Light. Odion needed stall cards like this one to protect his life points as he assembled all the pieces of his circuit puzzle for the arrival of his ultimate beast. Swords of Revealing Light is a spell card that prevents your opponent from attacking for 3 turns. My first crack at it involved the introduction of sword counters since I thought that would be flavorful and removing 1 each turn. Viewers pointed out a couple ways I could do this differently. Why not make Swords of Revealing Light a saga instead? While this could work mechanically, I don't think it fits flavor-wise given the fact that sagas are storytelling cards depicting important historical events in Magic's lore, and all the chapters would essentially be the same. Another commenter raised an interesting alternative that I think would fit better. Swords of Revealing Light would be an enchantment for 3 white mana with Vanishing 3. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Personally, I really like the way this update turned out. Shifting gears to a card we haven't seen so far on this channel, Odion also ran the trap card Curse of Anubis. With an effect virtually identical between the anime and the real-life TCG, this trap card changes all effect monsters in play to defense mode, then makes their original defense 0 until end of turn. Here's where a clear distinction in game design between Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic becomes evident. Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters can and regularly do have 0 defense points and still exist on the field, whereas a creature in Magic dies automatically if it has 0 toughness. What's more, while I normally like to translate Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards that switch monsters to defense mode into MTG cards that tap creatures, I don't think it would really be appropriate in this instance. The spirit of Curse of Anubis is to turn your opponent's effect monsters into squishy sitting ducks for you to attack and destroy, with the stipulation that your opponent won't take any battle damage from it. Here's how I'd adapt Curse of Anubis. This would be an instant for 2 generic, 1 black, and 1 green. Creatures with abilities your opponents control have base power and toughness 0-1 until end of turn. Attacking creatures must be blocked this turn if able. What do you think of my take on Curse of Anubis, or do you have an idea of how you'd do it differently? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Curse of Anubis isn't the only card in Odion's deck devoted to the ancient Egyptian Lord of the Dead. Judgment of Anubis was another trap card in his arsenal. The real-life version is significantly nerfed compared to its anime counterpart, which negated the activation of a spell card, destroyed all monsters on the field, and inflicted half their total attack as damage to your opponent. I think a Death God's Judgment should be more powerful than sniping one measly creature, so I'd make Judgment of Anubis an instant for 3 generic, 2 black, and 2 red. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Judgment of Anubis deals X damage to target opponent, where X is half the combined power of creatures destroyed this way rounded down. However, I'd also make it a true MTG trap card like I did for one of Joey Wheeler's trap cards in his Duelist Kingdom video. If your opponent casts a sorcery spell this turn, you may pay 1 generic, 1 blue, 1 black, and 1 red, rather than pay Judgment of Anubis' mana cost and counter target sorcery spell. As an average Magic player, I think the payoff of this card would be pretty impressive for Grixis players, but like all other trap instants, I feel it would be pretty situational at best. The final piece of setup required for Odion's boss monster is the spell card Temple of the Kings. The real-life card allows you to activate a trap card the turn that it's set, and also send Temple of the Kings and Mystical Beast of Serket to the graveyard to special summon a monster. The anime version, however, had the simple effect to allow you to tribute a monster and pay half your life points to summon a monster from your hand instead. This is a rare situation where I want to include the best of both worlds in the MTG version, so I'd make Temple of the Kings a legendary shrine for 1 green, 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 black. The first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 4 generic less to cast, in keeping with the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG version's trap quickening effect. Pay half your life and sacrifice a creature. Put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Activate this ability only once each turn and only as a sorcery. And finally, the moment we've been waiting for and the one Odion's been patiently prepping the field to enable. Mystical Beast of Serket is a level 6 Earth Fairy with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. If you do not control Temple of the Kings, destroy this card. Banish any monster destroyed by battle with this card. If this card destroys a monster by battle, it gains 500 attack. The anime version is a ritual monster whose effect also allows it to count as multiple tributes for the tribute summon of a monster, and also has a much stronger absorption effect. Let's see if I can fit this all reasonably onto one MTG card. Mystical Beast of Serket would be a 6/5 legendary scorpion god for 3 generic, 1 black, 1 green, and 1 blue. If a creature dealt damage by this creature would die, exile it instead, then put X +1/+1 counters on this creature, where X is half the exiled creature's power rounded up. If you would sacrifice 1 or more creatures, this creature counts as X +1 creatures, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. If you don't control a permanent named Temple of the Kings, sacrifice this creature. Phew! That was a lot, but I think it technically works. There you have Odion's Battle City deck translated into Magic the Gathering cards. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts about Odion's deck down in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe for the next Yu-Gi-Oh! To MTG video. Thanks for watching. Oh, you're still here. Weird, so am I. Well, while we're here, we might as well talk about some new Odion support cards released in 2025's Maze of the Master expansion, starting off with the Man with the Mark. This is a level 4 Earth spellcaster with 1000 attack and defense. When it's summoned, you can add 1 Temple of the Kings or related spell or trap from your deck to the hand or send it to the graveyard. It also prevents your Temple of the Kings, Apophis monsters, and itself from being destroyed by battle or card effects, assuming both it and the temple are in play. I'd make the Man with the Mark a legendary human Gravekeeper, a new type I think could work in MTG. He'd be a 2/2 for 1 white, 1 black, and 1 green mana. When this creature enters, you may search your library for a card named Temple of the Kings and add it to your hand or put it in your graveyard. If you control a permanent named Temple of the Kings, this creature and instant creatures you control have indestructible. Permanents you control named Temple of the Kings have indestructible. More synergy for Odion's strategy. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is fond of releasing powered-up support cards to act as stand-ins for their weaker predecessors. One such card is Treasures of the Kings, a field spell designed to replace Temple of the Kings for all your Mystical Beast of Serket needs. It also has a super specific search ability that I don't think meshes too well with MTG, and I hate to overdo those, but it does have an activation effect that I think could still work. This would be an enchantment for 1 white, 1 black, and 1 green. When this enchantment enters, you may search your library for an instant creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This enchantment has the name Temple of the Kings while under its owner's control. This last bit is super clunky, but I felt the need to include it because of Mystical Beast of Serket's effect. There are actually 2 cards I can think of that can change names despite this seeming to be a major no-no in Magic: Spy Kit and Volrath's Shapeshifter. So while this effect isn't entirely unheard of in MTG, I do agree it's still exceedingly rare and probably wouldn't work this way on a real card. Since Temple of the Kings got a retrain, why not the starring Scorpion itself? Merciless Scorpion of Serket retains the same attribute, level, type, and stat line as its weaker Battle City counterpart. This monster also has Yu-Gi-Oh's typical search your deck for this card type effect that often appears on modern cards. However, this version also has a summoning requirement calling for the banishment of a level 10 or higher monster from your hand or deck. It has a slightly buffed effect compared to its predecessor in that it can destroy a monster by its effect rather than battle and absorb half its attack points. This allows it to out far more powerful monsters that the OG Mystical Beast would have been too weak to overcome. I'd make Merciless Scorpion of Serket a 6/5 legendary Scorpion God for 3 generic, 1 black, 1 green, and 1 blue. If you control a permanent named Temple of the Kings, you may exile a creature card from your hand with mana value 10 or greater rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Merciless Scorpion would also have First Strike, Death Touch, and when a creature dies after being dealt combat damage by this creature this turn, put X +1/+1 counters on this creature, where X is half that creature's power rounded up. Definitely more value in combat, but I'm curious if the OG's exile from combat is more useful to hinder graveyard synergies. Which one do you think is stronger? The Scorpion and its Temple weren't the only Odion cards to get retrains. In addition to his signature trap monster, which we'll cover in a moment, Judgment of Anubis also got a retrain in the similarly named Verdict of Anubis. This counter trap card negates the activation of an enemy spell or trap, triggers a Raigeki effect on your opponent, and then burns them for half the combined attack of all their destroyed monsters. This card is way stronger, so rather than giving it a cheap alternative casting cost as a trap, I just make this a straight up instant for 3 generic, 2 blue, 2 black, and 2 red. Counter target instant or sorcery spell. Destroy all creatures your opponents control. They can't be regenerated. Verdict of Anubis deals damage to all opponents equal to half the combined power of all creatures destroyed this way, rounded down. Speaking of Anubis, that unsung Egyptian god finally makes a direct appearance as Anubis the Last Judge, which is one of my new favorite Yu-Gi-Oh card names just for how raw it is. I mean, it honestly goes harder than it needed to. Anyway, this is a level 10 Earth Fiend with 3000 attack and 0 defense. This card has a convoluted summoning requirement, sending 2 cards, Traps and or Temple of the Kings, from your graveyard to the bottom of your deck. You can also discard Anubis to grab a Man with the Mark from your deck. When one of your spells or traps is destroyed by a card effect, you can destroy any card your opponent controls. Focusing on what I would say are its core effects, I'll turn Anubis the Last Judge into a 6/1 zombie jackal god with a whopping mana cost of 7 and 3 hybrid black and green mana. However, you may put 2 instant cards in your graveyard with different names on the bottom of your library in any order rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Whenever a non-creature, non-land permanent under your control is destroyed, you may destroy target permanent and opponent controls. Activate this ability only once each turn. And last but not least, we arrive at Apophis the Serpent, a continuous trap card that becomes a normal monster with the same stat line as Embodiment of Apophis, but then you get to set an Apophis trap from your deck and activate it this turn if you want. When this trap card goes to the graveyard, you can also grab an OG Embodiment of Apophis from your deck and add it to your hand. I'd make this an instant creature Snake Warrior for 3 generic and 2 black, ever so slightly steeper than its predecessor. Since the Yu-Gi-Oh version can't search out itself anyway, I'd also make it legendary. When this creature enters, you may search your library for an instant creature card and put it onto the battlefield. When this creature dies, you may search your library for an instant creature card and add it to your hand. With value like this, I think its slightly beefier mana cost is warranted. Here's hoping Magic adds instant creatures to the game someday soon. And there you actually have Odion's Battle City deck and some of his new support translated into Magic the Gathering. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss the next Yu-Gi-Oh! To MTG video. If you can believe it, spooky season is just around the corner, and I plan on adapting some spooky Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards to celebrate. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you being here, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.